The following is an original production of AZPM News.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, best-selling novelist Jeanine Cummins talks about her newest book, Speak to Me of Home. Meet Tim Farris, an artist who lets his creativity guide him from ancient traditions to untraveled horizons. An essay from Rebecca Doyle about finding the first signs of spring in some of Arizona's harshest terrain. And you and your pet are invited to join a parade. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. Every year, the Brandeis Books and Authors event brings a select group of award-winning best-selling authors to Tucson to meet with readers and share wisdom about their craft. This year's #1 New York Times bestseller for her book American Dirt will be a featured guest. Her name is Jeanine Cummins, and her new novel is Speak to Me of Home. It couldn't be more timely. It's a multi-generational story involving the lives of 3 Puerto Rican women, Rafaela, her daughter Ruth, and granddaughter Daisy, as they navigate identity, cultural displacement, and the meaning of home across decades. Sarah Ariano spoke with Jeanine Cummins from her home in New York City.
I absolutely loved the book. I felt so represented in this book myself as a third-generation Latina woman. It really reminded me of home.
Oh, that makes me so happy. This is my favorite comment. I love hearing that. One of the things about writing this book was that it is my most autobiographical novel. It is very much based on my family and my father's family. You know, as I was writing it, it really felt to me like it's a story about not belonging, and I have had my own sort of journey with not belonging. And so I didn't anticipate that this comment that you just made would be one of the comments that I would hear so frequently from other people, that they felt in some way that this story represented their own experiences. And it has that has made me feel less alone in my identity.
With so much of the story being almost autobiographical, were you ever scared about putting certain things in there?
I think it's a funny moment in our culture to be a novelist. And I think I've had to put all of those kinds of fears aside. You shouldn't have to be brave to write a novel, but in our culture right now, you do. Everyone has very strong opinions about who should be able to tell what stories and in what way. And I am a really strong believer that if you do the work and you put your heart and soul into the story that moves in your heart, in this country, especially at this time, novelists must have the absolute liberty to tell their stories in whatever way they feel moved to tell them. And I think it's a really important time to stand up for that right and to safeguard that right at a time when so many books are being banned. So whatever fears I have as a writer, and I had a lot of them when I was writing American Dirt, I really had to learn how to move past those fears and just devote myself to the story that I knew I wanted to tell.
The scene with Daisy and her mom Ruth in the car with Carlos after he had changed his name. Just hearing Daisy be so meticulous about telling her mom she was moving to Puerto Rico and planning it in a way that she trapped her mom in this car to tell her. What was your thought process in writing that scene behind Daisy and Ruth? The argument and the misunderstanding and just Carlos chipping in the background.
Carlos is such a pain in the butt. He makes everything worse. I love him, but he's like a steamroller. There's no room for other people. He's just like, this is how it is. And he's like laying down the law. And meanwhile, Daisy is trying to be careful with her mother's feelings and actually make progress in this conversation. And I was really fascinated by that interplay between the generations, because it was my experience in my family that the ways we talked about identity changed with each generation to such an extent that we did not understand each other. So not only were we being judged by people outside of our family for how we were performing our identity or experiencing our identity, but also even within the family. Ruth kind of rolls her eyes at her children when they articulate their connection to their roots. That was something that I recognized in my own family.
You mentioned this guilt of pretending their identity, and I saw that throughout the book in this underlying melancholic tone. Why did you think that that melancholic tone was necessary in this book to communicate these women's journeys with their identity, with their culture?
It's because it was mine. That was my melancholy at the time that I was writing this book. To be clear, those experiences that I had, that really public reckoning with my ethnicity in the wake of the publication of American Dirt, that was like a very traumatic experience for me. And my whole sense of myself was disturbed. I should say, many of the scenes in the book are true. They're real. There was tremendous melancholy in each generation, like what my father and his siblings endured in their childhood experiences being othered in this white community in St. Louis, but also at the hands of their mother, who really just wanted them to pass and made them feel ashamed and encouraged them to eradicate anything to do with Puerto Rico from their personhood. There was so much melancholy there. It was latent. That melancholy was inherent to the characters that I was writing about because those were our experiences and they were laden with a kind of the grief of assimilation.
And the rage I felt during that scene of Peter and Rafaela in the country club.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I know.
And just Ruth's unawareness of it in a way, of just that childlike innocence because of it. And it just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, but she's unaware, but yet she's also absorbing it deeply into herself. She knows it ain't right. She doesn't understand the nuance of what's happening, but she knows that there is something evil afoot in that exchange. And she examines her own skin as if she has done something wrong by being the color that she is. She takes it into herself as a child, and it becomes part of who she grows up to be. It was the truth for so many people from that generation, from my father's generation. It was horrific, you know? But I should also say one thing that I try to do this in all of my books, and it was very important in this book because I write about themes that are quite heavy and, as you said, melancholic. It's so important for me to also make sure that the reader has an experience that is full of hope and joy and lightness and comedy. And sometimes I hear myself talking about the books and I'm like, oh my God, why would anyone ever read these? They sound so sad when we talk about the themes. But, you know, I hope that you also come away maybe even primarily with this tremendous sense of love, not only that the characters have for each other, but that they ultimately have for their culture and their roots and the joy that they find in rediscovering what it means to understand the definition of home.
That was author Jeanine Cummins talking to Sarah Ariano about her book, Speak to Me of Home. On Thursday, March 12th, Cummins will be a guest of the Tucson chapter of the Brandeis National Committee for their annual book and author luncheon, which begins at 9:15 a.m. at the Hilton East Tucson Ballroom. Cummins will be joined by award-winning journalist and TV host Lisa Niver and authors Larry Waldman and Miriam Gershow. Proceeds from this event will benefit the BNC Professorship in Engineering Sciences at Brandeis University. You can find a link for more information on the Arizona Spotlight page at azpm.org. When I found out that one of multimedia artist Tom Farris's creations was Cherokee Superman, based on his indigenous roots and his lifelong love of comic books, I knew this was a conversation that had to be. Looking at his webpage meant going down a pop art rabbit hole, grounded by his life experience and enlightened by his wild imagination and fearless approach to creating art in every available medium. Tom Farris will be visiting Tucson later this month, and his work will be featured at the Arizona State Museum on the U of A campus.
My name is Tom Farris. I'm Oto Missouri and Cherokee. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, which is kind of a fancy way of saying I make weird stuff.
I love the quote you had from your sister from your childhood about, oh, he's making stuff with trash again.
Yeah, it served me well in my adulthood, and so much of my childhood, a well that I return to often. The cartoons I grew up with, or if it makes sense as a medium to kind of translate the message I'm using, I tend to try to find something that exists in the zeitgeist. So there's a measure of something familiar to the audience, and they're like, oh, that's Batman, but I don't know what that says on it, which is odd. It's so odd that people just have to ask.
So being fearless about working at different mediums is definitely, I think, an aspect of your work that immediately reaches out to people.
I think it's all part of kind of the original concept. A good example, I would say, maybe would be like the Cherokee hoverboard. I could paint a painting of a hoverboard, and, it would be interesting and somewhat dynamic, but I thought it was much more interesting to actually paint a skateboard deck to look like a hoverboard, and then it conveys that so much better. Because, to be honest, I am not the most talented painter, jeweler, woodworker. I'm not the best at anything, but I'm good at I'm decent enough. I'm a jack of all trades, but master of none. And so it's, for me, more the idea of trying to convey the concept in the most natural medium. So, I learned to do jewelry and specifically sand casting because I had this idea that I really wanted to do a four-finger hip-hop ring in Cherokee syllabary. And I knew I couldn't necessarily laser cut that, or, this was going to be the best way to do it. So I flew to California and stayed with a friend for a week to learn how to do this because I just really loved that idea. And that piece has hardly been seen by anybody, but it's just something that I was really passionate about, learning the process to make that one thing in particular. But again, if I want to do it now, I know how to do that.
I think that makes you more relatable to the visitors to your shows, that they can look around and see you experimenting and exploring different mediums and conveying messages unique to each. People who are non-Indigenous from other cultures, and they can say, oh, I never thought of this. Like, this guy's communicating some great ideas here.
I think that's intentional on my part, for certain. I'm not saying that I dumb things down, because there's definitely an element of a little bit of inside joke, or at least inside reference, fanboy reference for sure, in a lot of what I do.
Yeah.
But I think that also helps identify my audience. But I want it to be something that is relatable, because they take that part that is relatable, that initial thing that catches their eye, but then they get the little bit of information that I'm trying to give them from the Native perspective. It's like, so for the Batman piece is a good example. Again, it's like people, that's, hey, 1966 Batman, that's from a distance, what that is. But you get up on it and you're like, oh, well, this is different. I don't know what this is. Tell me about this. I'm like, oh, well, Cherokees are one of the few tribes that have our own written language, and I'm very proud of that. And so this is how we would write Batman. It's pronounced Shlamiha Askaya. And I get to tell them about Cherokee language and the syllabary and its use, and that it's used in the oldest running newspaper in Oklahoma. I get to tell them all this information that they probably did not know before. They get to go away with a little bit of information just because they like the Batman image,
Okay, well, this makes it the perfect time to ask you to explain something about Cherokee Superman to the listeners.
The entire concept kind of came from the frustration of being a native comic book reader in the 90s especially. I was very frustrated because minority characters at the time weren't written by minority writers, and they were very just flat feathers and fringe and cringy superhero name, shaman, warpath. It's like, we get it, they're native. And to me, like, if you think of this idea of Superman, do you even consider what race Superman is? Because obviously he's an alien, but it shouldn't matter, because the most important thing about him is that he's Superman. Like, what he can do, it doesn't matter what race he is. And so I wanted that idea of, like, look, if this guy was truly a superhero, he just happens to be native. But what's going to be more important to people is that this native guy can do these things. And how might that perspective change how he uses those powers? That was never, ever really kind of the perspective that those characters were written from. And so I just wanted more from, my native comic book characters growing up. And so that piece was kind of that statement to, I wanted something more authentic. And so what I did was take that most iconic image and make it decidedly native. There have been several iterations of Superman across the multiverse. This is just my version of the Cherokee multiverse Superman.
And tell us about that car that you detailed.
So that kind of took that concept a little further. The piece is called Shifting Paradigms. And so the passenger side artwork is all covers from vintage comic books that have Superman, Batman, Shazam, Rex the Wonder Dog, all in feather headdresses. And basically this was the representation of, kind of native culture in the mainstream. And then I wanted the response to that. So I did my Cherokee Superman down the side on the driver's side, the one now in charge. And there's a lot of symbolism in the car. It's a white European car for a reason. I redid the badging, but I did a whole series of, in 1966 Batman, the onomatopoeia words, the fight words. I did that in Cherokee, sort of. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But Cherokee, we don't have onomatopoeic words in Cherokee, so I had to use punch, slap, kick. So the actions that would cause the sound. So I did a whole series of those and then made a fabric out of that. And so that we did the headliner and door panels. I made a custom matching war club for it. I made a custom gear shift. I really touched every kind of part of the car. And originally also the idea was kind of giving a secondary life or using all of the Buffalo concept. This car had been wrecked and I bought from a salvage yard, and it was not going to be driven, but I wanted to kind of give it another life. And so that goes into this incidental learning. I had to learn how to rebuild the entire front end of a car.
I spoke with Oklahoma-based multimedia artist Tim Farris. His gallery show, Tricksters and Truthtellers, Different Ways of Seeing, will be at the Arizona State Museum later this month, as Farris visits Tucson to lead a workshop, give a talk, and welcome visitors to ASM's pop-up exhibit at the Tucson Festival of Books. There's a link for dates and times on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Next, an essay by author and listener Rebecca Doyle. She comes from Rhode Island, but she's found her home here surrounded by Sonoran beauty. Rebecca Doyle is an outside contributor to the show, and her opinions are her own.
Bloom hunting. The deserts of southwestern Arizona bloom early. March, February, sometimes January, if they bloom at all. For those of us who seek ephemeral desert flowers, the hunt starts earlier still. We track fall and winter storms in California, Baja, or Sonora in the hopes the rains will spill over into Arizona. When the rain finally falls, we note when and where. By mid-January, I was ready to see if the on-again, off-again winter rains had translated into sprouts or even blossoms in the western deserts. If you look at a road map of Arizona, there's a left-facing right triangle in the southwestern corner. The Ruler Strait U.S.-Mexico border forms a right angle with Highway 85, where it runs north from the border to Gila Bend. I-8 from Gila Bend to Yuma is the somewhat wobbly hypotenuse. At a glance, this triangle encloses what looks like a lot of empty space with different owners and levels of protection. Organ Pipe National Monument, Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge, Barry M. Goldwater Air Force Range. El Camino del Diablo, a historical route linking Ajo and Yuma, roughly parallels the base of this triangle. This wonderland of lava fields, sand dunes, and granitic mountain ranges can be accessed with a well-equipped four-wheel drive and appropriately completed online permits. Heading southwest from Ajo in January, the Camino looked far from promising. Between the desiccated creosote bushes and leafless palo verdes, I noticed numerous collapsed saguaros. One had both arms slumped downward, as though resigned to age, drought, extreme heat, or some combination of the three. Tough country, even for a cactus. Further west, patches of gray-green sprouts began to appear under the creosote bushes. The black pyramid of Pinacate volcano loomed in the distance beyond the rust-colored border wall. I was reminded of previous hikes to the nearly 4,000-foot summit and the strange feeling of gazing south over sand dunes to the glistening Sea of Cortez, then turning around to see miles of lava flows and cinder cones extending north into Arizona. This winter, patches of desert sunflower, Jurea canescens, lit up the lava rocks. I channeled the Floor is Lava song as I hopped from rock to avoid the fuzzy sunflower seedlings nestled in the gaps. The landscape grew greener past the lava fields, and where the road met the rolling sand flats, the blossoms began. Evening primroses, asters, borages, mustards, mallows, and sand verbenas covered the sands in shades of yellow, pink, and white. Birdcage evening primrose, Enothera deltoides, with its oversized white flowers, bloomed beside cage-shaped structures formed from the curled woody stems of previous primroses. Like artful tumbleweeds, they will eventually break away and spread their seeds. In the wash, there was a thicket of tuberosa bushes covered in muted red flowers. The slender blossoms attracted throngs of Costa's hummingbirds, more interested in battling one another than feeding on the copious nectar. Between washes, the open country alternated between shades of green and brown, reflecting the extremes of the winter rainfall lottery. The sand dunes can be harder to read from a distance. Sand holds copious amounts of water, and its tendency to release that water slowly and steadily means that a single heavy downpour is sometimes enough for thousands of plants to sprout, grow, bloom, and set seed weeks or months later, even if not another raindrop falls. Sand dune mass blooms rarely happen, but when they do, there is nothing like them. One stretch of dunes I visited in November was so saturated that a thick fog rose in the evening and lingered past mid-morning. The truck vanished from view mere yards away. During this January trip, I was keen to revisit these dunes, but soon disappointed to find only a few sparse flowers. Conditions need to be just right for a landscape-wide dune bloom. Rainfall totals and timing, temperatures, wind, all matter. It also matters where you are on the dunes. Bloom hunting is work, but persistence sometimes pays. Sure enough, the northern end of the same dune system was awash in flowers. I was soon dizzy from the colors and sweet, fresh fragrances. Masses of magenta desert sand verbenas, Abronia villosa, rubbed shoulders with gigantic white evening primroses. Tiny bundles of pink-white Spanish needle flowers, Palafoxia arida, decorated the ends of slender, sprawling stems, alternating with patches of glistening yellow blazing stars, Mentzelia longiloba. The flowers appeared to extend all the way to the mountains on the horizon. I let my gaze linger on this first installment of a Sonoran Desert spring. For Arizona Spotlight, this is Rebecca Doyle.
Tucson and Rebecca Doyle has many published articles, stories, and essays that spring from her outdoor adventures. Her 5-word motto is write, bike, hike, paddle, bird. Finding forever homes for animals in need and making sure that people can afford proper care for their pets are the main goals of the nonprofit Friends of Pima Animal Care Center. Next, Sarah Ariano talks with Tori Chisholm, the Chief Executive Officer of the Friends of PAC, about their annual community event, a parade on 4th Avenue to celebrate animals and the people who love them.
So you've been doing the Pets of Pima parade for the past 5 years now. Did you think you were going to be here after the first one or before the first one even happened?
When we actually thought of the idea, it was still in the midst of COVID. So I was going around town meeting with potential sponsors, participants, all those things, talking about an event that would take place not too long after people were afraid of going out in public settings. So it was a lot of tap dancing, as I called it. But what I tried to convince everybody is, no, we're looking at something that's much grander than that. Obviously, the core of it is people walking their pets, but it's not just their dog, because not all pets are dogs. There's cats, there's reptiles, there's birds, there's farm pets, there's pocket pets. We're also going to add all the parade elements. We're going to have bands and floats and entertainment and all that. And I think most people had a hard time conceptualizing what that might look like. And even to this day, the people who've never been before, the very first time they go, I see them after the parade and their eyes are just this wide and they're like, I had no idea. And so after the first year, I was pretty confident that this would continue to grow into a really wonderful community event. And now we're going into our 5th year, and that's proven to be the case.
What is the oddest animal that you've seen at the parade?
My favorite all time is, I want to say it was year 2. Someone had brought a chicken that they dressed up and they had it in a buggy. And they're pulling the buggy along. This chicken was just running around this buggy all dressed up. It was the most remarkable thing that I have ever seen, frankly. And I mean, that's just one example. We have so many amazing types of animals that get represented. And what I love about it is it goes to show you that there's such a variety. It's like, everybody thinks cats and dogs. But at the same time, there's so many people that have really meaningful connections to whatever their animal might be, whether it's a snake, whether it's certainly birds. And even, when we get the goats and the pigs and we've had sheep before, it's just amazing. So it just shows you that there's so many different types of love to go around.
What is the goal of the festival?
Well, so obviously we conceived of it to be a signature event in support of Pima Animal Care Center. For the listeners who might not know, Pima Animal Care Center PAC is our county's animal shelter, serves about 19,000 homeless animals a year. We have another 40,000 animals that we serve in the community, trying to provide preventative support so those animals don't have to be surrendered to the shelter. What's wonderful about PAC is it's an open mission shelter. It is literally the shelter for all of Pima County. We wanted something that was encompassing and welcome and everybody could be a part of. And that's why we really settled on the parade and the festival concept, because we felt like this is something that anybody could be a part of. They can choose to sign up to be in the parade, which we ask them if they do that to raise or donate $50 to walk with their animal. It's just a great way to show off your love of your animal while supporting those animals that currently don't have families. And so they could do that. But even if they couldn't do that, they could come and watch and they could be a part of the whole spectacle. And so that's where it all came from. And we really feel like that's what we've achieved.
For the people thinking about attending, what can they expect at the festival?
We have about 15 floats. We have 5 bands, We have 5 different musical groups. We have a wonderful partnership with Tucson Comic-Con. So after you just seen a bunch of dogs walk by, all of a sudden you see stormtroopers and Siths and princesses and all that. So you see so many amazing things. So one of the fun things we've done this year as part of our 5th anniversary is we've incorporated themes. We've never done themes for the event before. So this year's theme is the Wizard of Paws. There's no place like home. We have an adoption event. It's the HSL Properties If I Only Had a Home adoption event. We have a dog adventure course that's being put on by Soul Dog Lodge. We actually have a wonderful thing we do with the Spark Collective where they do flash tattoos, animal-themed flash tattoos, and then donate the proceeds back. I mean, it's amazing. They do the coolest little, kitties with spike collars. And this year I know they're doing a bunch of, Wizard of Paws themed stuff. We have that. We have there's art exhibits that's animal related, photo areas. We have I think we have 80 vendors coming out this year. We have food trucks. One of a new addition is we've added a large video board so that we can do the video replays of the parade, so that if people have walked in the parade, they actually can see everything and watch it and see themselves. I tell you, the best thing about the event that I always say is it's good for unlimited smiles and at least 1 million tail wags.
Sarah Ariano spoke with Tori Chisholm, Executive Director of the Friends of Pima Animal Care Center. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. The show is a production of AZPM and is posted weekly at azpm.org. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Sarah Ariano. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
This has been an original production of AZPM News.